Number 7. Linda and Wayne Ricard. In 2021, Linda Ricard was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum of 28 years served in connection with the death of her millionaire landlord. Ricard and her husband Wayne, who was also sentenced to 10 years and 6 months, had been the live-in tenants of Anthony Southeran at High Havens Farm in Oxfordshire, England. As his caregiver, Ricard essentially starved the reclusive millionaire to death in a plot to inherit his estate. In March of 2014, his severely emaciated body was found in his room, and it was determined he died from a lung infection brought about by a combination of malnutrition and a deep-seated pressure sore. The death was not treated as suspicious at first, but the investigation was reopened because his bank account was used after his passing. Leading up to Southeran's demise, Ricard had forged his will and systematically isolated him from family members, including his daughter Hannah. She'd also forged the will of his mother Joy, who died in 2012. She stole over $400,000 from both their accounts, and her utter disregard for Southeran's basic needs had resulted in what the presiding judge described as the most horrible of deaths. Number 6. Maria Malvero and Mariana Fonseca. In March of 2020, a human torso and several other body parts were found washed ashore in different areas of the Algarve, Portugal's southernmost region. The remains were later confirmed as those of 21-year-old Diogo Goncalves. Local police followed the evidence and arrived at couple Maria Malvero and Mariana Fonseca, aged 19 and 23 respectively, as the main suspects. Goncalves had recently inherited $77,000, which is why Malvero and her girlfriend had targeted him. On March the 18th, the former seduced Goncalves and promised him a lap dance at his home. It was there that Malvero gave him orange juice laced with sedatives provided by Fonseca, who worked as a nurse at Lagos Hospital. Their plan was to restrain him and access his bank account. At some point, however, Goncalves regained consciousness and Malvero put him in a headlock until he passed out. Fonseca, who'd been waiting in the car, walked in and successfully revived him, but Malvero resumed her attack and fatally suffocated Goncalves. The couple then chopped off his fingers and used the prints to access his bank account from his cell phone. After transferring the funds, Malvero stole a cleaver from a supermarket and the women dismembered his body. They waited 24 hours before first getting rid of his torso, and in the following day scattered his head, forearms, hands, and feet into the sea from cliffs in the area. The women subsequently claimed that the dismemberment was inspired by the American TV series Dexter. Between March the 20th and the 23rd, they maintained his Facebook page active so that friends and family would think he was still alive. In the spring of 2021, Malvero was sentenced to the maximum of 25 years in jail. It was argued that Fonseca's attempt to revive Goncalves had absolved her of his murder, and she was given a suspended sentence of 4 years for desecration of a corpse, theft, and fraud. Number 5. Rick Schmelzer. In 2017, a Texas man was sentenced to 45 years in prison for murdering his grandmother in an effort to gain access to his inheritance. It was effectively a life sentence for 44-year-old Rich Schmelzer, who in July of 2014 had traveled to the East Dundee, Illinois home of Mildred Dodie Darrington, aged 85, and stabbed her to death. Schmelzer led a lavish lifestyle that included female escorts, among others, and had considerably fallen back on his mortgage. Other family members refused to lend any more money to the father of four, who then sought to expedite his $400,000 share of Darrington's estate. He told his wife that he was going to a conference in Dallas and rented a car to make the 14-hour drive from Frisco, Texas, to East Dundee. It was there that Schmelzer snuck inside his elderly grandmother's home and fatally stabbed her in the neck, even though he'd covered trip expenses with a prepaid gift card, and the rented car had been paid for by his cousin. Schmelzer left enough evidence for the killing to be traced back to him, and he was arrested a month later. Number 4. Murder of Jacob Henry Millison. On May the 16th of 2015, Jacob Henry Millison, aged 29, was fatally shot in his sleep at a ranch in Parlin, Gunnison County, Colorado. To the rest of the world, however, he was reported as missing. Millison and his sister Stephanie had grown up on a 700-acre ranch that belonged to Rudy Rudabaugh, their mother Deborah's second husband. When Rudy died in 2009, he left Stephanie and her husband, David Jackson, money to buy a new home in Denver while it was understood that the ranch would pass on to Millicent. The $3 million property would become an object of contention among the siblings, their mother, and Jackson. Millicent feared that his sister and her husband were trying to take the ranch away from him. In 2017, 2 years after he was shot to death, an individual who would become a police informant arrived to the ranch as the family had dug up what looked like human skeletal remains from a manure pit. They were later confirmed as Millicent's. His mother would plead guilty to second-degree murder, claiming she alone had gone into his room, shot him with her Smith & Wesson Lady Smith .357 caliber revolver, and then buried the body. She described him as a drug addict and alcoholic, claims that were disputed by his friends, also adding that she'd grown weary of him living with her. The police immediately doubted Deborah's confession. Stephanie and her husband were also arrested, as they had most to gain from Millicent's death. It was subsequently determined that at the very least, they'd pressured Deborah into shooting her son and then helped her dispose of the remains. Cell phone records showed that, in spite of Deborah's claims, the couple was in the county at the time of the killing, and a deleted text message from Stephanie's cell phone, sent at 3:17 on the night, read, "It's time to play." Ultimately, Deborah was given a 40-year sentence and died in prison, while Stephanie and Jackson were sentenced to 24 and 10 years, respectively. Number 3. Sarah Stern. New Jersey teenager Sarah Stern was last seen on December 2nd of 2016, and in the days that followed, her car was found abandoned on a bridge in Belmar. The 19-year-old's body was never recovered, and the scene initially suggested that she'd taken her own life. However, the ensuing investigation revealed that Stern had been robbed and strangled to death by her former high school classmate, Liam McAtasney. In the aftermath of her disappearance, amateur filmmaker Anthony Curry contacted the authorities, claiming that McAtasney had revealed to him that he'd killed Stern. The motive had been money she'd inherited from her mother, who died of breast cancer in 2013. The authorities and Curry, who was McAtasney's trusted friend, then set up a sting operation in which the filmmaker secretly recorded the killer's confession with a hidden camera. In the recording, which was instrumental in securing a conviction, McAtasney said that it had taken him about half an hour to kill Stern. He went on to mention that the worst part was that he'd expected to walk away with $50,000 to $100,000, which the young woman kept in a safe, but found that Stern had less than $10,000. He then enlisted the help of his former roommate, Preston Taylor, who'd also been the victim's prom date, to dispose of her body by throwing it from the bridge. Both men were arrested, and Taylor collaborated with investigators in securing further evidence against McAtasney. The killer was sentenced to life without parole for first-degree murder, conspiracy, desecrating human remains, tampering with evidence, and other charges. Taylor, as an accomplice, was given a prison term of 18 years. Today's topic was requested by Instagram follower Dezal410. If you have any other topics you'd like to learn about, subscribe and let us know in the comments section below, or follow us on Instagram and reach out to us there. Number 2. Brendan Lee Johnson and Cassandra Ann Ribe. In 2014, a Colorado teen murdered his grandparents with the help of his girlfriend to hasten his inheritance, which consisted of a small house and $20,000. In May, 19-year-old Brendan Lee Johnson and Cassandra Ann Ribe, aged 18, snuck into the Sterling home of Charles and Shirley Severance, both in their early 70s. They planned to smother the elderly couple with pillows as they slept. They crept inside in the early hours of the morning but found Charles awake. Johnson fought his grandfather, who's believed to have succumbed to a heart attack during the struggle. Shirley reportedly asked, "Why are you doing this to me?" before the couple attacked her. The grandmother offered the combination to the safe, and as she was trying to open it, Johnson stabbed her to death with a kitchen knife. The teenage couple tried to cover their tracks by burning Shirley's body in a fire pit near Sterling and scattering some of the remains in Nebraska as well. They couldn't do the same to Charles, as the body was too heavy, and called the authorities, claiming they'd found him dead. The authorities faced little difficulty in identifying them as the killers, and they both confessed following their arrests. The couple entered guilty pleas to avoid the death penalty, in which Johnson was sentenced to life without parole, while Ribe was given a sentence of 80 years. Number 1. O'Sullivan family. In October of 2020, an inheritance dispute resulted in what a coroner described as a terrible tragedy almost beyond human comprehension at a farmhouse in Asolas outside Kanturk, Ireland. It involved 59-year-old Taj O'Sullivan and his wife Anne, as well as their two sons, Mark and Diarmuid, aged 25 and 23. Tensions in the home had developed after Anne had been diagnosed with terminal cancer in February, and the issue of inheritance caused a rift within the family. Diarmuid claimed that he'd take his own life if he didn't have his way with the will. His lion's share claim to the 140-acre property was supported by his father, who threatened violence and pressured Anne into favouring Diarmuid. She would, however, take Mark's side and wanted to split the farm even, as her other son was also set to inherit land from his father. Mark began to fear for his mother's safety as well as his own, to such a degree that he slept by the foot of her bed. The situation continued to deteriorate. On October the 26th of 2020, at around 7 a.m., Anne awoke to the sound of gunshots. She found that Tajon Diarmuid had gunned down Mark in his bed. When she arrived at the horrific scene, they shot him again with bullets ravaging his arms as he helplessly tried to defend himself. One bullet fatally pierced his skull. Anne was left alive by the duo, who only took her cell phone, and she ran to a neighbor's home to alert the authorities. Both Diarmuid and his father took their own lives via a single gunshot wound each, less than half a mile from the property. A few days earlier, Diarmuid had warned a neighbor that the lights on the property would never shine again and that there would be a trail of carnage. 6 months after the tragedy, Anne, who believed she'd been left alive to suffer, passed away as well. Thanks for watching. Would you rather inherit a luxury home or receive a $10,000 monthly allowance for the rest of your life? Let us know in the comments section below.